rolled out a new task force to investigate executive compensation for nonprofit organizations that receive state money. The move came one day after a scathing expose in the New York Times, which profiled several executives who make close to $1 million a year. That's right, $1 million, running health clinics that rely heavily on Medicaid funding. Now, the governor's task force will focus solely on organizations that get money from the state. Today, we learned that 2 members of the legislature will have seats on the committee, Democratic Assemblyman Stephen Engelbright and Republican Senator Carl Marcelino. Both of these guys are from Long Island. Now, while this commission is designed to crack down on those who might be profiting with taxpayer money, some nonprofit advocates are just a little bit worried that it could go too far. Doug Sauer is the head of the New York Council of Nonprofits. He's joining me in the studio now to talk more about this. Long time no see.
Hi.
It's good to see you. So this is, you're not saying that compensation of the sort that I just mentioned in the New York Times story should be left alone. That's not your concern.
No. It's outrageous and should be eliminated.
Right.
It's against IRS regulations from our point of view, and that's not the only case. You have a situation here where private colleges, but mostly not-for-profits. Shirley Jackson Jones, who is co-chair of the governor's appointed Economic Development Council, makes close to $2 million a year. So that's state-supported institution.
Yeah, you know,
so
and
let's be fair about that.
Yeah, I was also going through members of the Medicaid task force, which of course is still meeting, again appointed by the governor, and you have a number of healthcare executives there who are making in the millions of dollars, and they of course are the heads of healthcare agencies, hospitals, and networks.
HMOs.
Yep, that get that participate in Family Health Plus, Child Health Plus. They receive Medicaid. So you're talking about, now they run very large organizations. I mean, that would be the argument. Well, we run a big organization.
They are nonprofits. You could also make the argument that the state should be looking at the for-profit entities that it does business with or subsidize and what their compensation is using state funding.
Like what, for example?
Global Foundries, where $1 billion went there. There's lots of corporate welfare that goes on.
Economic development subsidies, you mean?
The governor's press statement used the word taxpayer-supported nonprofits. You could say taxpayer-supported for-profits as well,
right,
if you want to get at the issue of people lining their pockets, quote-unquote, with government money. Our concern, our organization represents the average not-for-profit community-based organization, not the mega corporations, the institutional interests. And those folks are averaging $40,000 to $60,000, and they're underpaid, and the general and nonprofit employee workforce, like in a daycare center, is making minimum wage or close to it with no health insurance. So the issue for our sector is underpayment, and the state itself contracting for services that it doesn't pay for even the cost of. So this issue, we agree it needs to be rooted out. It's an IRS issue. It's a state of New York issue. There should be an investigation on how these salaries have gotten to where they are when the New York State government has known it with contracts, when the Attorney General gets their tax forms that reveal all compensation of these folks.
Right. I mean,
this is not a secret.
These 2 guys in specific who were highlighted in this New York Times story that everybody sort of had a breakdown about, and first of all, are now no longer, very rapidly actually, seemed to step down from the head of this organization that provided services to the disabled. They also sent their kids to college on the backs of this nonprofit.
It's total abuse.
Right.
Shouldn't occur. It's against our values as a charitable sector. But it is something that the state of New York has known about for a long time. So there's complicity there. There's involvement there. There's been disclosures. And I think those things need to be really rooted out. We believe, yes, root it out, but also look at the overall relationship between state government and nonprofits, from prompt contracting on down, where the business relationship isn't a fair relationship, and also handicaps not-for-profits from even surviving and doing the basic service.
You're serving on a task force that's looking at the reform of nonprofits set up by Eric Schneiderman, the State Attorney General. Specifically, he's looking at member item grants that are allocated by state lawmakers to various nonprofits. Do you support that system, the way that it works?
The member items?
Yeah.
No, we don't. We support member items per se. We don't support the way the system works, because there isn't a good vetting of that. There's abuse in that as well. But it is a way of getting money to communities in ways that traditional funding streams don't recognize needs. But it's not an equitable system, and there's been problems with it.
Well, and also it's often used as sort of a reward, right? It's often used to reward entities that help a particular elected official in a district. More money is given to elected officials who might be in trouble, quote unquote, marginals, as we call them. I mean, the whole system is really mired in politics, and if it was lined out in the budget instead, item by item, it might not be so bad.
As long as it allows flexibility for like a senior center to be able to get support for a new boiler system, because traditionally those kinds of things don't get within budget processes. So there's room there to meet the discretionary needs of a community, I think, in ways that the bureaucracy just doesn't respond to.
Right.
But it's the abuse you want to single out. I think with the executive compensation now, it needs to be rooted out. We do need to look at how state government has allowed that to happen, because there has been disclosures. And at the same time, it needs to be looked at in a broader relationship with nonprofits. And it's interesting that the Comptroller's Office has made for several years a lot of reform recommendations that have not been adopted. The Attorney General now is launching that, but the executive branch hasn't. And these contracts are with the executive branch, and a lot of this is with the executive branch. So we'd like to see the governor expand beyond the excessive compensation issue, which is not an issue for the average nonprofit, and the public needs to understand that. We're talking about institutional nonprofits and bad apples.
Right.
That is not the typical not-for-profit organization by far. They're typically underpaid and working with volunteers themselves. We'd like that to expand into the overall relationship where there's respect for what people are doing every day, particularly in this economy, as they do with the business community. And let's expand that out. Let's look at taxpayer-supported businesses and what they're getting as compensation.
Doug, we're about to run out of time, but I also want to ask you this. You know, their member items actually have not been allocated in recent years.
And that's
so it is hurting
it's
you.
hurt folks.
So what could the state do to improve its allocation of dollars as it looks to reform this whole system?
I think there needs to be standard criteria for that. I think it's good that perhaps the Attorney General take a look at that. Perhaps there needs to be some objectivity there. Those member items get farmed out to different kinds of state agencies that really don't want to administer them, so maybe there needs to be a central administration within that. There needs to be a process there that's standardized that doesn't allow political uses of those dollars. Now, I just want to make one other point regarding excessive compensation, because New York State just this year has passed allowing B corporations to be formed, public benefit corporations.
Right.
There's legislation to allow L3C corporations. This is creating entities that can access government dollars as well as charitable dollars without reporting compensation, and doing exactly what you're moving on one hand, saying we need to get better control of this, but then state governments creating entities that can bypass those accountability. So there's no comprehensive policy here. It's chaotic.
Okay, so perhaps this task force will in fact create one of those comprehensive policies. That's what we're hoping.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think
okay,
so.
Doug, when Doug Sauer, when in fact we see more from this task force, we will have you back to have a discussion about this. I want to thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.